Thanks for joining us on ThriveCAST. I'm here with Mr. Sam Garcia, owner and CEO of Sam Garcia Architect. He is a trailblazer in McAllen, Texas. They are turning South Texas into a hub for high-density, mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly hotspots. At the helm is Mr. Garcia himself. He's a licensed architect whose vision and leadership is really reshaping the urban landscape in southern Texas. So thank you for joining me, Sam.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about Sam Garcia Architect. What are you guys all about?
Well, Sam Garcia Architect is a small but growing architecture firm and now engineering services provider that started in 2013 in McAllen, Texas, which, as you mentioned, is at the southern tip of Texas. We're about 15 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. The region that we serve is known as the Rio Grande Valley, which is an area that comprises the four southernmost counties in the state of Texas. It is a land area that's approximately the size of the state of Connecticut, so it's a pretty good size area. And we have a population of about, I don't know, 1.3, 1.4 million people, which has been consistently growing for the past 30 to 40 years. It's an area of the country that is predominantly Hispanic. It's a bicultural area. We share a lot of culture and cross influence with northern Mexico. And
Yeah.
so we're a very unique region in that aspect, but we're also part of Texas, which is a dynamic growing state, which has been over the past 25 to 30 years, a state that's been in the ascent, and we continue to enjoy high quality of life, an ever improving quality of life. And, so that's kind of where we're at. McAllen and the Valley, as it's known, is an urbanizing area. I'd say, yeah, we're not a major urban area, but it's a growing area that's consistently becoming more and more urban and more densely populated, which is is a
Isn't
great
that a
opportunity.
challenge?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's awesome
It
because
is. Okay.
we are always running into interesting projects, and there's a very much an entrepreneurial mindset here. There's very much it's an area that I think culturally comes from a background of perhaps in the latter half of the 20th century, an area that started off as a rural sort of backwater kind of isolated area that was at the time vastly undereducated and perhaps impoverished. But over the past, I would say 30 plus years, it is slowly but surely continued to pull itself
Evolve.
up. But yeah, and we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. And there's a sort of, I think, a palpable sense of reaching and striving for better. I think
Yeah.
certainly my parents' generation and generations before, always wanted, like everywhere, wanted better for their children and better for the next generation. And so those investments and those moves have started to pay off dividends in terms of educational attainment, in terms of economic success and the things that come along with that.
And you were born and raised in this area, right? So
I
this is like your stomping ground.
Sure. I was actually born in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico, and spent the early part of my life actually in Denver. So, but we moved here. Yeah, I was still a kid. I was in elementary school when we came here. And so, yeah, for all intents and purposes, I've spent the vast majority of my life here. And this is where my roots are. This is where I, set up my family, and I'm raising my family here with my wife and children. And so, yeah, this is definitely home.
Your stomping ground. I love that because you've seen kind of the evolution of growth from, 30 plus years ago to what it is today. And it's really evolved. So what kind of projects do you really focus on around there? Because we mentioned high density and mixed use. What does that
Mm-hmm.
mean for your architecture firm? What do you guys focus predominantly on?
What we focused on, when it comes time to start a business, right? The sort of initial launch of a business is anything and everything, right? And so we started off as a generalist firm, primarily concerned with private commercial development, be it individual business owners or real estate developers who have looked to, create investments and capital improvements. And as of late, what we've been focusing more on is really business to business type services. I think our firm does very well working for entrepreneurs and people who are looking to increase their value on investments that they've made. So a lot of times the best clients that I have are clients who have worked with other architects in the past, and they're seasoned in terms of what they think they can expect with an architect. And then they come and they work with us, and I think they find that our bread and butter is really to be an extension of the client and really try to take their ideas and implement them in a very, to the best of our abilities and to really maximize their investment. So we've done that. And then we've done a fair bit of, municipal work and sort of public level work, which I think is also an important part of the practice because it shows that you're part of the community and you're, when we get a chance to do improvements to the public infrastructure and the public sort of publicly owned buildings, I think that sort of gives us a stake in the community and it shows that we're we're all in with our local municipalities.
So how do you balance like the community needs with the developer's interest in urban planning and making it kind of mesh into the personality of the areas you serve? How do you do that? How do you balance that?
Well, what I have found is that a lot of times developers, for some reason, they can get a bad rap, and there's a sort of oh, a developer came in or a developer did this, and there's sort of a pejorative, you know, tone to when you speak about developers. But what my experience has actually been is that, developers are risk takers. They're taking big swings and they're trying to, they're trying to hit home runs and they're putting a lot on the line. And the only way that they can be successful is to put something out into the public eye that the public is going to want and that is going to be accepted. So, we find that oftentimes there's a lot of alignment and a lot of developers, any developer that's really worth his salt has a pretty good finger on the pulse of what is in demand or what could hit or what could work. So, really, our job is to take those ideas and sort of maximize them and try to understand what the essence of what they're after is. But then we add, I would think through design, through efficient construction methods, through, sometimes it's just small tweaks and adjustments to what a developer already has, kind of what they're sort of thinking. And then we can find ways to really make that type of, to make those developments flourish.
So you're really trying to make their vision, but you're trying to turn it into something that's going to be functional within the community, I would imagine.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times, when we work with our clients, because sometimes clients, they have a vision and they have a sort of that's kind of based on where they're coming from or their background or things that they've seen. And our job is to sort of translate that and understand sort of the essence of what they're getting at and be able to sort of filter it. I think the filter that our firm brings is to take that and make it even better, to add to it, to add more dimensions and more life to it. And sometimes, oftentimes it's happened to where we bring something back to an owner and we sort of show it to them. And there's that sort of aha moment of, yes, that's what I wanted. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know quite how to say it, but you got it. And then you even added on top of it a little bit more, or you put a little bit more polish, a little more spin on it that, takes my idea from a 7 to a 10. And
Isn't
so I
that
think
so fulfilling? Like, it's like,
yeah,
yes, I nailed it,
yes,
knocked it out of the park. Like,
exactly.
yes.
It's like, it's almost like when you go to a restaurant and you sort of, I'm kind of in the mood for this, but then the chef comes back or the cook comes back and says, okay, try it. How about you wanted this, but how about you try this? And it's like, that's even better than what I wanted.
Yeah,
So
I love
that's
that.
always the fun part when you can sort of bring back more value than they expected.
So how do you like handle the what if you have like differences in creative vision between what your firm envisions and what the client wants? Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, that's part of, that can be a challenge sometimes. I don't think I've ever run into a situation where a client and our firm are miles apart in terms of vision. I think one of the
Yeah.
things that's very important before you even start a project, before you really commit to working with a client, is going through a vetting process. Because when a client comes in, they're interviewing us and they're looking to see what we're about, but we're also looking at the client and trying to understand where they're coming from. And so I think a lot of times, if the communication is clear from the beginning, if we define what the scope of work is from the beginning, and if we are able to sort of go through all the particulars of a project early on, I think we can avoid those situations. I think times that a client and an architect can be far apart is when a client comes in, sort of drops off a project brief, says, "This is what I want," and then the architect goes off into his little, into his cave, and then comes out and says, "Here." When you if you sort of practice architecture that way, you run the risk of not hitting the nail on the head, of kind of being off. So what we try to do is avoid all of that by ensuring that we have pretty clear communication from the get-go, and making sure that the client that we understand the client and the client understands us. I think those problems can be avoided in that way. And then on the other hand, we've had situations where it's not too often, but sometimes you can come across a client that has very specific vision, or something that, for whatever reason, doesn't vibe with what we're doing or the way we approach things. And in those cases, there is a certain freedom in being able to say, I don't know that we're the right fit, and so, we're not gonna get too far, and we better, you know
Cut ties. Gotta go.
cut ties, or let's not even try to do this, because I think we can both see that we're not that we're not on the same wavelength.
So, what do you think, like, when that happens, what do you think the biggest misconception is about architects and what it is that you guys do for a living? Let me give you an example. Engineers are traditionally labeled as introverts, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they don't socialize, which is not really true, but
Uh-huh.
they do have that label. With
Right.
architects, what do you think? Is there any sort of misconceptions that people probably need to squash in order to be able to create a really divine working project with you?
Wow. Well, I think, from what I've seen, I think sometimes there can be a notion of, and I think architects, we can sometimes do this to ourselves. I think there every architect in some way has this sort of, can sometimes have this feeling or this perception that we're sort of these, like, misunderstood geniuses, that, nobody sees the big picture like we do, and that can
Mm.
come across as being a bit aloof or a bit of a prima donna. And I think a lot of that sort of stems from architectural education, because
Yeah.
architectural professors are like that. That's sort of like a persona that for some reason is pretty prevalent in architectural education. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times when architects come out of school, that's what they've been exposed to. And so we have the sense of, that's how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to, you know, wear really outlandish glasses, dress completely in black, and, just we speak in these very um, esoteric kind of, like, ways about building envelopes and structural expression and the tectonics of a building and stuff. Whereas I think,
The
so,
artist, the artist in you, the artist
the
perception
artist,
of,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think that's a bit of a caricature, and it's promoted by architectural media,
yeah.
and maybe everybody that went to architecture school and studied architecture read The Fountainhead at some point and sort of adopted that kind of persona. But with time, I think, where I've tried where I've maybe outgrown that, or left that behind, is when when I kind of come to realize that when a person, either an individual or whether they're an individual who represents a larger entity, be it a municipality, a company, a school district, whatever the case might be, when a person gets to a position in their life where they need to hire an architect, and this is something that I've always that I implored to my employees, and something that I always believe when I meet with a client, especially for the first time, is that you don't walk into an architect's office needing architectural services if you're some kind of chump. You come into an architect's office because your life is going really good. You know,
Yeah.
your personal life is stable, your professional life is super stable. You've got some money in the bank, and you're ready to hire an architect to design a building, which is a huge step.
Yeah.
So I have this deep appreciation for anybody. And even if it's somebody that we don't end up working with, or they end up going with somebody else, anybody who's in a position in their lives to consider hiring an architect is doing something right. And when this has been many years, but when I started sincerely adopting that position, I found that all of a sudden my clients weren't the problem. Once I can put myself in their shoes and have a little bit of empathy and appreciation for what it is that they're trying to do, be it the developer or the sole entrepreneur that just wants to build an office building, or somebody that wants to do, a mixed use project or a high density project, or has some grand ambitions. No matter what they are, they're coming to an architect because they're ready to take a risk, and they're ready to put a lot on the line. And by the time they come looking for an architect, they've already been dreaming and thinking about their project for years. So
Yeah.
we're really the end result of a long line of really smart decision making, shrewd actions. And so I'm always kind of blown away by somebody that walks into an architect's office ready to get to work. So I try to honor that, and I have found that by doing that, the relationship between myself and my clients tends to be a lot more compassionate and a lot more sort of
Genuine, right? Like,
genuine, and there's a
yeah.
camaraderie there, and which helps the project go better. And inevitably, because every project has a boo-boo or a mistake or a situation that always comes up, when you've
Totally.
already when you've already built up a certain amount of respect and rapport and appreciation, those mistakes or those, little errors or hiccups that happen in a project, a client's going to be a lot more forgiving. But when you come in, if you try to come in as sort of playing the big shot and playing the I know better than you type thing,
Mm.
that's not a really that's not a recipe for long-term success. And that the proof is in the pudding, because a lot of our clients are repeat clients. And I go
Yeah.
back to what I had said earlier, in that we do really well with clients who have worked for other architects previously. I've been told many, many times that, like, wow, the last time when we worked with an architect, they didn't do this, or I didn't know that it could be this way. So, we take a lot of pride in sort of being, I wouldn't say easy to work with. That's not exactly the right term, but that there's a genuine level of authenticity between ourselves and our clients.
Yeah, there's a mutual understanding, there's a mutual respect there. So,
Mm-hmm.
in this day and age, it's really hard to come by. And I feel like even with all of these other architecture and engineering and construction firms that I'm speaking to, the ones that are always rising to the top are the ones that are really, really fostering those client relationships and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that there's a clear understanding between the deliverables and what's expected, and keeping those channels of communication. I mean, it seems like a universal known for those that are most successful. So it's nice to
Sure.
hear you say that. And it's definitely resonates through a lot of the other firms that I have spoken to. So speaking of that, I want to talk about some of your projects, because you guys have done some pretty cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one that really stood out for me was the La Jolla Fire Station project. And I don't know
Sure.
why, but I mean, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of cool. So I wanted to bring it up and chat about it and talk about
Yeah.
why it was a good project for you, or why wasn't it a good project for you? And, what did you get out of that?
Well, I think it was a good project for us, and it wasn't without its challenges and without its sort of, moments of doubt, because La Jolla is a city in South Texas, but it's a small city. It's sort of at the periphery of sort of the outward growth curve. So it's kind of as growth is, tends to go radiate outward. La Jolla is still right on the cusp of sort of on the outside. It's kind of next in line to really boom. But it's still like a small town feel. And the thing that was most rewarding about doing that project is when you walk into their existing fire station, which was a volunteer fire station, right? The city up until just recently, up until several months ago, had an all volunteer fire department. So it was a building that was sort of a refurbished building from the 60s that, it's just a very subpar kind of facility that, has probably not seen, its best days are 30 years past.
Yeah.
And so to be able to go from that to a somewhat modest, it's not a, the pinnacle of fire department, sort of, it's not the vanguard of fire departments, but it's a marked improvement. And to go from where they were at to where they're at now, and to sort of be there as the city has begun to transition from a all volunteer fire force to a professional fire department. That's been very cool to watch. And then this is also a story of how different communities can pull together, because that fire station was funded with federal, state, local, and county money. So it was interesting also to sort of see the sort of kind of politics,
Dynamics,
the
yeah.
dynamics between,
Woo!
different,
Yeah.
officials and layers of officials, and how that all kind of came together to work. And
Ah,
so that was fun to watch. But I think the main thing is realizing that an underserved community and a larger rural area, which is sort of in the surrounding areas, now has, top flight emergency services, both in terms of fire, in terms of EMS. And I mean, you don't have to go very far to understand, if you look at current events, what can happen when fire protection is lacking.
underserved. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we can be talking of small little La Jolla, Texas, population 12,000, all the way to our second largest city in the country. And it's sort of a through line that is important for the basic health, safety, and welfare of our communities. And that, as an architect, that's what we're tasked by doing by license, to be responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of people through building design. So to get to be, you know, involved with that, to get to see, some of the political posturing and things that had to happen to make it go through, by hook or crook and all that type of stuff. It was pretty wild. I mean,
Yeah.
it was funny. The project had bid out, and we were kind of going through contractor selections, and we were still hemming and hawing over dollars and cents, trying to get the price down. And then all of a sudden, I get a call one day. We picked the contractor. We're going to go this direction, and we're having the groundbreaking next Thursday. So, okay, all right. A year and a
I,
half into this whole thing, I came to find out later, shortly thereafter, that particular day coincided with like early voting for the mayoral race. And so the mayor wanted the groundbreaking under his watch and wanted the press there, and the tent and the VIPs and everything. And I mean, he got reelected for sure. He got reelected. And
yeah.
I
The
mean,
s- the strategy though, like the
yes,
strategy is so. And look, I've been on the government side, so I completely understand that. There's
right.
always usually some sort of underlining element that
Hmm.
is always tied to the bigger picture. And whatever that
Yes.
is, it might be unspoken. Nobody
Hmm.
might be talking about it, and only a few handful of people know, but
Yep.
there's always underlining. So
Yeah.
I can totally empathize with that
And
story.
that's one of the things that I love about being an architect, is that, we find ourselves at the intersection of private development, which includes, real estate and banking and construction and city planning and urban planning. And then on the public side, it's the political aspect, the funding aspect, the sort of aspect of public safety and public welfare,
Yeah.
perception, the media gets involved, so we kind of tangentially get to touch so many different worlds that ultimately interact with buildings and with construction so architecture gets this sort of cool vantage point of being kind of in the middle of these things. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. I
it
love that.
I really dig that about being an architect. It's one of my favorite things that you get to meet, you know, all walks of life and it affects all walks of life.
It totally does. I mean, I don't know who I was having this conversation with, but I was having this conversation about how architects are basically like storytellers.
Uh-huh.
You guys are literally writing the book of what the community is going to be defined as, right?
Uh-huh.
So the design of the buildings that you're creating, the aesthetic appeal to them with the landscape architecture outside, all of those things play into the bigger community story. And you guys are
Uh-huh.
really storytellers and with a very artistic background. So
Uh-huh.
I just think it's fascinating because really the book starts with you guys. Like it
Uh-huh.
starts with you. You guys start it, and then the remaining chapters are written after you guys have written your chapter, which is kind of cool. Like,
Yeah, no,
you
it's
can
neat.
build on that.
Yeah, yeah, it's like one of those things that if you go back to, I guess it was, Shakespeare said that all the world's a stage.
Right.
Well, we're the set designers, right? We get to set up the scenery of the stage, and then life gets to happen in between it. But we set up the set where the life takes place, be it all the way from residential to you name it, everything in between. Life takes place in and around and through and between different aspects of architecture and the related sort of fields, and so that's kind of cool.
You guys also do like parks, right? And public spaces. Do you guys, is that
Yeah,
part
we,
of
we've
your
Yeah, we've done a handful of parks over the years. We've done, like all the way from like dog parks and, things like that to, amphitheaters, performing arts type facilities and, kind of a little bit of everything in between.
So do you have like an example of like a recreational space that you worked on that's like transformed the area?
Well, yeah, let's see, good Lord, it's been about 8 to 10 years ago now. I started working for a developer that, talking about somebody who really had a big vision and a sort of a transformative vision for creating a sort of all-inclusive type community. They had this vision for a large community that combined residential and educational and retail and sort of a whole mixed use type community. And they hired us and we got to work on probably about 4 or 5 large park and public space type areas. We did a pretty good sized community center that had like swimming pool and community rooms and stuff. And we did a sports park, not a sports park, but an amphitheater, and then kind of a regular park and so forth, and some offshoots around that had to do with kind of walking trails and such. And it wasn't even that long ago. I ran into somebody, a friend of my wife that lives in the community, and I mentioned to her, I said, "Hey, do you guys use the community center?" She's like, "Yes, my kids, we take them swimming there all the time, and we had a baptism that we used the community room, and we're very familiar with it." And so it's kind of one of those things where you think like,
Awesome.
That's neat.
Yeah.
That's special. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
It's
think
like
that that's.
those are huge impacts, right, on a
Mm-hmm.
community that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, unless you're in the mix of it, people don't really acknowledge or understand, but you know that you're doing something good for the
Uh-huh.
long-term progression of that community. Parks, so being an AEC professional, the parks portion of the business has always been my favorite
Uh-huh.
because when you're working in government, sometimes parks is the happiest portion of the government work that you're doing. So nobody is going to be mad about a park, right? Like they're gonna usually embrace it and want to
Mm-hmm.
endorse it. So it's always the happy side of the government
I
entity that you're working with. So yeah, parks are the best, I
yeah,
think.
I know, I agree. I think it tends to promote, fitness and outdoors and sort of
Totally.
getting people active and which are all these are all things that we can never have enough of. You know what I mean?
Totally. Totally. Talking a little bit more about architecture and trends, what
Okay.
do you think is one of the current architectural trends that you think is going to really take off and help your profession move to that next level? Is there anything out there that you're kind of eyeing that sparks interest for you?
Oh wow. Well, I think let me think about it for a second. Trends in architecture. I think one of the trends in sort of development overall, I would say, and this has probably been something over the past 15 years or so, I think that overall, we as a society are more design conscious than we have been, that perhaps we were before. I don't know if
Yeah,
that has to do with social media, what we see on apps, what we see on your Instagrams and your different things like
totally.
this. But people are much more image conscious. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm just saying that people have a higher appreciation and understanding of the power of images and the power of aesthetics and the power of beautiful spaces and beautiful things. So I think that as these generations, which have been raised and sort of completely subsumed in it since childhood, as those people are no longer kids anymore, but as they become older
Yeah,
and get into the decision making phase of their life, I think that we might see a resurgence of the importance of design. And so I think that as a society, that's a cool thing. I think
totally.
also the sort of and as an architect, you want a general public that has a sort of design appreciation for good design and
Yeah,
doesn't just view it as something, frivolous or something that is, whatever. It's not the important part. It's just the sort of secondary part. So I think long term, and this is perhaps a bit of a hope, but I think it's a well-founded hope that we will see a resurgence in people who are design conscious. Beyond that, I think, sustainability and
yeah. That's what I was going to mention is like educational like environments and like the
uh-huh,
sustainability side of things is always
uh-huh.
on topic. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's gotta be moving in some direction, right? That's gonna help our environmental impact on this little
It's
world that we live in.
I mean, I think so. I think that, to our profession's credit, we as a profession, and this was happening when I was sort of first getting out of school, first getting into my career. LEED was a kind of a new thing, and it was sort of the
Mm,
vanguard of design and the AIA and other, organizations across the country and across the world made a real push towards raising the awareness of sustainability and of the impact that we make and so forth. Where I think that's been a very much a net positive is that the industry as a whole really embraced it. And so today, in 2025, a lot of the things that we do kind of by default and that are already baked into our building codes and our best practices, those were things that were kind of cutting edge, 25 years ago. And so I think that says a lot that we've kind of come so far that things that were really, you know, experimental or new have been broadly adopted and broadly, embraced by the profession. So I think that speaks to our profession, and that's a, speaks well of our profession. And so I think,
yeah. And
it's
I
pretty
mean,
cool.
it's like almost like it's no longer really a conversation. It's just automatically part of what it is that
Right.
you guys do, right?
Right.
To make sure that you are remaining environmentally conscious when you build LEED certified buildings. So
Right.
I can completely empathize with that for sure. So one other question for you. Do you think that with the innovation, do you think that artificial intelligence is going to impact your industry at all? Is it already impacting your industry at all? Or is there any part of that that's taking part in your industry? Because in my industry in marketing,
Uh,
it has overtaken, it is
uh,
everything. So
Uh-huh.
some industries are a little bit different. What about in architecture?
Well, I think, from a business owner standpoint, and from sort of somebody that's kind of in charge of an organization, I think it would be unwise to ignore it and
Yeah.
to say that it's not going to have an effect. I know that for me personally, I've used AI insofar as putting proposals and contracts and kind of taking over the writing part of work. It's sometimes
Yeah.
it's cool when you can just tell ChatGPT, hey, I need a 400 word letter that says this, that, and the third, and make sure you include these points, and it pops it out for you.
Seconds. Done. It's like,
So
yes.
there's a certain efficiency that kind of comes out of that, which I think that's not architecture specific. That's just more administrative and business specific. But
Yeah.
as it relates to design um and architecture per se, I think that in the I could see a future where we do have a more where AI does play a bigger role. You know, I wish I knew exactly what it was so that I could kind of position myself there already. But I definitely think that as AI permeates, all other industries and you know commercialization broadly, it would be foolish to think that it
It's not
wouldn't.
going to hit you guys. It's at some point.
And it'll right and my prediction would be that it will likely be in ways that we don't expect right now,
Yeah.
that in hindsight it'll be like, obviously, that's how did we not do that before. It's like we always remark about, like, you know Google Maps, right? Like, how the heck did people get anywhere? Like,
I know, right? And I mean, I
you
grew up in a time with no cell phones, so yeah.
right. I,
Oh,
who knows? Like, we went, you go on vacation you go someplace you've never been before, type in the address and it takes you there like nothing.
yeah.
And it's like,
Instead
how
of
did,
pulling out a map and navigating
and
your whole
asking directions and all that. Like,
yeah. Oh,
so,
we've come
but
so far.
nobody saw that when a cell phone first came out. But now in
Yeah.
hindsight, that's very like a no brainer. So I think it'll be kind of similar in the AI way of maybe nobody sees it
Yeah,
right
not
now, but
yet.
when we're on the other side of it, I think maybe we'll look back and say, how did we ever do it before this? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
totally agree. So,
Yeah.
is there any one project that you are just super stoked on, that you are really proud of, that we should take a look at and kind of tout your expertise that you are really proud of?
One of the things that I'm most proud of is a project that's under construction right now. It's a project that was our largest project to date. We were part of a larger team. We weren't the prime firm on this project, but we did have a lot of participation. The project is the commercial side of a land port of entry. In other words, an international bridge between the United States and Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this bridge connects.
That's huge.
It's massive. It's massive.
Huge. Yeah.
So whereas before, it's still under construction, it's not complete yet. But whereas before it was a border crossing that handled exclusively passenger vehicles, right? Just people coming over. Now it's going to begin to handle commercial import and export vehicles, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to foster trade between the United States and Mexico. And as somebody who is a Mexican American, born over there but raised over here, family over there, family over here, by binational, bilingual. It's something that the fact that I got to work on a project that, enhances those ties and is so closely related to, this border of ours, which, say what you will, there's a lot of sides to it, right? There's the negative side and there's the parts that are, but there's also the
Complex.
positives. Yeah, it's a extremely complex issue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no clear cut, this is right, this is wrong. I mean, you can look at it from all sorts of different issues, but I think the fact that, one of the things that ties people together is the ability to, probably the mark of civilization, where civilization arose, is from barter. From, I've
Yeah.
got corn, you've got fish, let's trade. That
Yeah.
fosters peace. That fosters sort of mutual interests. And so, I think about it sort of really the big picture point of view of it's fostering trade between our nations, which is making us both more prosperous and more, secure and more integrated. But it's
Yeah.
also, and there's the architectural aspect of it also, which, when you work with, you're talking about, several federal, international entities, there's a lot of complexity that goes into that. And so it sort of stretches your muscles as an architect to be able to work in that arena.
Yeah.
The requirements become a lot more stringent. The expectations become a lot more complex and robust. And so as a firm to be able to step up to the plate and deliver in that aspect, and then to see it kind of coming to fruition is something that I'm really proud of, and
Yeah.
I think you talk about something that is going to be there for a long time and is going to be a part of, billions with a B dollars of trade and economic activity. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. You want to talk about making an impact? That
Yeah.
is going to make an impact. When is the construction expected to be complete? Do you guys know yet?
Nah, I think we're about 75% done. So we should be done. We'll be done this year. It'll be done
Okay,
probably
awesome.
fall of 2025.
Awesome. Awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. So, Mr. Sam Garcia from Sam Garcia Architect, what is your web address?
We are Sam Garcia, www.samgarciaarchitect.com.
I want to thank you for joining me today. I love talking to a fellow Texan up here in Austin. We're actually probably like 3 or 4 states away, even though we're in the same state because our state is so huge. But
True
yeah,
that.
it would take me 2 or 3 days just to get to where you are, but it's so great to have you on. And yeah, I hope you guys see much success moving forward, especially as the south portion of Texas starts to blow up, given the amount of growth that
Oh, yeah.
Texas is seeing right now.
For sure. Thank you, Shannon, so much. I really enjoyed this, and I know that you're really highlighting our industry, and you're
Yeah,
doing great work, and I appreciate you, and um, thank you.
yeah, no problem.